I'm going to talk tonight about Zakouma, but specifically about the first 6 years from 2011 on, when African Parks took over the management of Zakouma. Just to explain, where is Zakouma? It's because when I heard of Zakouma, we had to really go on maps. I didn't even know what was the capital or where this country was. So I would like to just explain a little bit where it is. It's in the middle of Africa. I know Brad Hansen and Kingsley reckon the middle of Africa is somewhere here, but actually Zakouma is in the middle of Africa. A landlocked country, quite a big country, very dry in the north, very wet in the south. If we go here, we can see, and from the beginning, very important, where Zakouma lie in relation to the Sudan, Darfur, because that's where all our problems came from. There we talk 10 days on horseback from Darfur to Zakouma. So it's in the south of in the Sahel, but in a little bit in the south of the Sahel. If you talk of Zakouma, here we always talked, Rod now said about in the south, visiting him in the rainforest there, but we operated small aircraft in Zakouma. So if you fly 3 hours north, you're in Enedi, you're in the beginning of the Sahara, in a very dry area in Enedi. If we fly 3 hours south, you with Rod in the rainforest. So in one day you can get from Rod right into the Sahara, and Zakouma lies in the middle, and that is one of the reasons Zakouma, it's such an interesting place. Also now, that Rod is muted, I can talk a little bit about the rainforest. People in the rainforest don't have to think. Everything is there right through the season. That's why they're so laid back. All the animals are there, water is there, everything is there. In the Sahel, it's a completely different story. Because of the seasons, you really have to plan, you really have to think in advance, otherwise you don't survive. And one of the reasons why working in Zakouma with the people there and working in that area is so wonderful. If you don't think, if you don't plan with the seasons there, it works out in a disaster. Zakouma has a very wet season for 6 months. This is what the park looks like. It's very flat, cotton soil, everything fills up with water, and for 6 months, you have to work within that. It can become very challenging. Can be very challenging living there. But that is part of the diversity of Zakouma, is that very wet 6 months, which then slowly start to dry out. The only way to move in that time, and we'll come back to that again, is on horseback. There's no vehicles. You can do boats, but you cannot get very far. And the people get around on horseback, and why horses play such a big role in Zakouma. One of the patrols in a wet season, sometimes for kilometers, they have to travel through conditions like this. As the wet season, as it dries out on the floodplains, you start to get these pans. And that is when all the wildlife, bird life, everything starts to congregate around these pans. And that's really when Zakouma comes to life. It becomes then 6 months of very hot, in the 40s in the day. It doesn't cool at night, no clouds, no rain, and it's just day after day of heat. And that's when you get these scenes where all the birds concentrate around these remaining pans, the remaining wildlife. And then you have the absolute time in the dry season when everything dries out, 40 degrees. You can see here the elephants during the day. This is the main herd of Zakouma, all around the trees just to get into a bit of shade. To understand Zakouma, the history and what has happened there, you've got to look at the communities that live around Zakouma. And it's a very interesting communities, people together with the seasons that over the years developed here. As it dry out, nomadic people with camels, with cattle, with sheep, goats, move from the northern drier areas down to the south. And they come and settle around Zakouma for the dry season on these open floodplains. It's a wonderful, colorful procession as they come down. Everything they own is loaded on their animals. Every night they set up camp. They come, some with the cattle, some with camels, with all their camels. That camel has got everything they possess is on that camel. At night they will camp out. It's wonderful people to visit. They're extremely friendly. You will not leave a camp without a meal. However, with their movements all over and around Zakouma, they also has been accused of very much involved in the killing of elephants, and it is so. We'll see that later, or be a logistic basis that people used when they come in and around Zakouma, because they're so hospitable, they're so friendly. That anyone moving around, you know, could use them to get food or rest the animals during any journey. The other communities around the park is the local people of Zakouma, the farmers, agriculture. They live in these villages spotted around Zakouma. It's very interesting to go in these villages. There's almost no plastic, there's no corrugated iron, there's no steel. Everything is built as grass, upgraded every year and with local material. There's no cell phone connection here. People live like this during the wet season. These villages are completely cut off. They live completely on their own. Again, later on, it became a very important part of protecting Zakouma to get the buy-in and to get the cooperation of these villages. Up to 50, 60 kilometers outside Zakouma, they still had a huge influence on our management. Zakouma is known for its elephants. And also people often ask me, why these dense herds? Zakouma always, that is basically the whole herd of Zakouma. And often we would see all these elephants in Zakouma in our times there from 450 up later about 500 in one dense herd. And you've got to look at the history of what happened around Zakouma over the last 200 years to understand that mechanism. Why does elephants do that in Zakouma? Just interesting here, it's one of the earlier photos. There's no calves, only adult animals. And we will go again why it is like that and the impact of that on Zakouma in the beginning. If we look at the map again of this area, Darfur in Sudan up here, we all know a little bit of the issues in Darfur. It's a very much the same situation with communities as in Chad. You've got what they call the Arabs, the nomads, moving up and down. As it gets drier, they come down all the way in CAR, all the way even in Garamba National Park, poaching there. And in the wet season, they move up north again. It's the same situation in the Sudan. The same nomadic groups, because always on the move, because they always never settle, never land. They stayed, if you can say it, behind with the agriculture, the villages, schools, settlement, land ownership. And it was there that the whole problem developed with the Sudan government using these groups, the Janjaweed, arming them and use them in the whole conflict there. But over many years, these Sudanese horsemen traveled down from Sudan into Central African Republic. where there were thousands of elephants. And they developed a hunting method how to kill these elephants on horseback. Jean-Luc Temporal was a well-known artist and a game warden who in the 60s lived in the Central African Republic. He was also later one of the wardens of Zakouma, a very good artist, and he wrote a book about this forgotten, what they call the forgotten hunt, about how these nomads will travel down hundreds of kilometers, set themselves up, go to search out these elephant herds. And they had a method of singling out one elephant with these broad blade spears, and on horseback with great skill, they will kill elephant after elephant that they can get out of this big herds. Over the years, they killed thousands of elephants like this, taking all the ivory, eventually loading the ivory then on camels and horses and taking it back up into Sudan. This is a current horseman around Zakouma, very much the same. If you look at the illustrations of the book of Temporal, you'll see all the saddles, the spears, everything he describes in there is still exactly the same as the horsemen you find today as around the Zakouma and with these nomads traveling there. This is just a photo of one of the first attempts where we put a collar on the elephants. Pete Morkel is somewhere in there without shoes on trying to find one of his elephants, but show you the panic if you came close to this herd. So what they had to do on horseback, they had to push out one elephant out of there. They take him to the one side on horseback, with them on horseback, pushing that elephant to the side and eventually kill it with the spears, taking the ivory out, and then stockpile, put the ivory on horses and send it up to the bases up in Darfur. And that basically eliminated all the big herds in Central African Republic over the years and in around Zakouma in Chad. That is how they were killed and why so many of these herds disappeared. The European Union for many years supported Zakouma. This happened throughout many wars. Chad, you must remember, has gone through a very difficult times, always with rebellions and wars, and through it all, the EU continued to support Zakouma. If that did not happen, I do not believe that Zakouma would have been there today. Even with difficult times, sometimes mismanagement, it continued. Some of the staff stayed there for many years and it had a chance to survive. As I said, Zakouma at this time went through many wars. If you want to read a very interesting story, go to the Toyota Wars of Chad and you'll see how the Chadians, just with the Toyota pickups and machine guns, destroyed the Libyan army in the north of Chad, taking on one of the best equipped military forces at that time. So the Chadians know about warfare, guns is all over, and in that time, of course, also the elephant population suffer. But in all those times, the EU continued to support Zakouma. It was a very important measure. Here you can just talk a little bit about we said the Toyota Wars in that time. This vehicle, this is how they will set up a vehicle typically on a rebellion raid or when the military go out. This vehicle was the vehicle given to us when we arrived Zakouma as one of the anti-poaching vehicles. Not the best vehicle if you go into the tourist camp to drive around with. Nobody wants to go on a game drive after that. Very interestingly, the Toyotas, you could, as a person, as a private person, not own a Toyota pickup in Chad. You have to get permission from the president if you want to have a Toyota pickup. And just because it's also, they regard it as a military vehicle. It's so easy to change that vehicle into a rebellion vehicle and then organize a rebellion and the whole thing starts over again. They like to do that. So we very slowly started to take these big anti-aircraft guns and rockets away, pack it away in a store, and tried to bring order that it wasn't an image of the park with all these weapons. A very interesting graph, and again, just to understand what happened in Zakouma. If you look here, in 2000, there was about 2,000 elephants in Zakouma. It jumped to 4,000 in 2002. This was because so many massacres and so many killing of elephants happened around Zakouma that Zakouma was then still a safe haven, and elephants moved into Zakouma. They were then followed by all these poachers and followed by the gangs who knew how to do this. And the elephants now quickly, from 2002 to when we started there in 2011, lost 90%. We found 450 elephants left in Zakouma in that short time. Of course, what I explained earlier with killing of elephants on horseback with spears, it changed now to AK-47s and belt-fed machine guns, and the whole situation changed where you have these tight groups of elephants, 10 or 12 people on horseback with AK-47s, and that's why you read about these massacres in Chad, in Bubangida, where 80 elephants at a time is killed. If they tell you 40 or 50 elephants are killed at a time in a massacre, you can take it that 100 or more have died, because all the calves around there is scattered and many elephants are wounded. We found very elephants dying, and as we investigate, we find old bullet wounds. So what we know of is a massacre of 80 elephants, but it's actually much more. In 2011, African Parks became involved as a partnership with the Chadian government and the European Union. And we, if I say we, Lorna, myself, joined African Parks as park manager there with the financial support from the European Union, the Chadian government, and African Parks, a private-public partnership. Now, to qualify to be a park manager there, and for all the people that is in Kruger, just to tell you, I have very few qualifications. I have no diplomas, I have no degrees or anything like that, but I learned in Kruger National Park about management. As a section ranger there, you learned everything what you need to know. Section rangers in Kruger National Park, in a way, that's not a previous century, very early days, their main job was to control vermin. Now, vermin is things like wild dog and hyena, lions. That's in the early days, they didn't believe that they really had a place in the park. They destroyed the calm life there. So section rangers had the job of keeping them down. Of course, to do that, you needed a lot of dogs, and they used the dogs to chase all these animals out, the lions out, and so you needed a lot of dogs, and the dogs needed food. So the rangers in that time could shoot 2 impala a month to feed all their dogs. Then later on, people like Gus Mills came into the park, and they convinced the authorities that this is not actually vermin, they have a place in the park, and they stopped all that shooting. Some rangers left and the good ones stayed. And they stayed with their dogs, because a game ranger with a dog is not complete. And we still, luckily, the rule of shooting 2 impala, it's not like that today anymore, but then the rules of 2 impala slipped through, so you could still feed your dogs. When I became a section ranger in Kruger, it's a wonderful thing. You have a lot of status. You have a very big area you can look after it. If you like guns, you have a lot of guns, pickups. You have everything, except your salary is about 200 Rand a month. So it's really difficult. So what we did was, at that time also, Epol came on the market, which is a very balanced dog food. So we decided the dogs will get Epol, and we will take the 2 Impala. And the 2 Impala you convert to biltong. If you have biltong, now you have something you can work with. Because a section ranger in Kruger, there's always road building or construction or anything going on around you. So now you use that and you do something we say scoring. You go to the guy who builds the bridge and you score 2 bags of cement. Where they build the houses, you score some pipes, you score a pump, you score everything, and you can really expand the value in your section. And that's how I learned to manage. You know, you really had to work out what you can do with the Impala, and the 200 Rand was actually quite a big thing. You can still go today to rangers' houses and you'll find that section ranger on 250 Rand or 200 Rand and 1 Impala has his private swimming pool next to his house there. But that's how we work. That is how I built up a management skill. Of course, now when I got to Zakouma, the EU gave me a budget of $2 million to work with. And you can imagine after all that training, how I could expand that $2 million and how I could run circles around the finance controller. The elephants we took over there, the herd, as we said, was traumatized. As you see there, there's no calves. We didn't know what those elephants are doing in the wet season. I also have to explain that all the management before, in the wet season, everybody, they closed the park, and for 4 months, all the expatriates that worked there went to Europe. Everybody that worked in the park went into the big cities. And it was actually a situation, the first time we went to Zakouma, we found 2 watchmen in the park looking after the houses and the infrastructure, no one else. From reports of the early pilots who worked there, Darren Potgieter, Mike Fay, we knew that in the wet season, the elephants leave, and we also knew that in the wet season was when the real poaching was happening. So we had to find out what happens in the wet season. We got in Piet Mokkel, the veterinarian, and decided to put satellite collars on his elephants to try and find out what happens in the wet season. We had very little time to do it. Before the rain started that first season, we didn't know how, we didn't have a helicopter or anything, we had to do it on foot. So you can see here the vehicles out there. Again, this elephant herd that is absolutely in panic. It's like a sardine run. Here we did 1 elephant, it's up there, the vehicle's up there, and that milling herd of elephant just moving around here. After doing 1, we couldn't do another one, we had to wait the next day. Interesting enough, every year we did this collaring. In the last years that we were there, in year number 6, we could do a collaring, walk after that, walk on, find the herd again, do another one, sometimes 3 in a row. The herd completely calmed down through those 6 years, and we could do the collaring much easier. Collaring was done, and we could start to monitor what was going on. From the beginning, the first year, we involved the local communities. This is a very important spiritual leader of the nomads around. We invited him in. He participated in the whole operation. That elephant, he himself revived with the antidote. And it was a very important a decision from our side, because from there we had a support of his, and he's very influential in the nomadic communities. We had his support throughout. He visited every year during the collaring. He understood what it is. He told us that any issues or any information we want were happening around the park, we should just talk to his people, and he kept his word. He often his people gave us early warning of armed group moving around. There's the first elephant we did, and him doing a blessing and a prayer for the well-being of that elephant. Results of the first collaring showed elephants are going all the way in the north, 100 kilometers out, all the way in the west. And we were in a panic. We didn't know how to be around these elephants, because you've got to remember it is completely wet. We had to use aircraft from the beginning. We had to build airstrips. We didn't have all-weather airstrips because they closed the park down during the wet season. Luckily, we had a lot of equipment that the EU left there, so we worked day and night until the first rain come to have a proper airstrip in place. We use that, and there, you don't know, there's no roads around Zakouma, but there's a lot of morals. Moral is the routes that the nomads use with their cattle. So it's usually open areas where you can easily land on. So we started to fly north and west where these elephants are going, landed and started to interact with the communities. Many of these communities didn't want anything to do with rangers or anything around them. And we really had to convince them that we're coming in a different attitude, we need their help, and we want to establish a bases near them. We used aircraft. Although without aircraft, the first years we couldn't survive. We had 2 aircraft there, and we constantly use them in the wet season to get rangers around all over. We had small strips. Every village we worked in, we made strips in to be able to fly out on short notice, to bring rangers in, to go and follow up on information. It was also very good for these isolated communities that there was a contact with someone at least. We had to put in, there was no communication, there's no cell phone, nothing. So we put in a digital radio system. We connected it up with an ops room at headquarters from where we could now start to monitor everything. And then we went out to these communities. Here is an example, Koran, right up in the west, about 80 kilometers outside of the headquarters of Zakouma. We negotiated there with that community. It's this Koran is actually, if I go back to that slide, is a very important village that lies on the route from travelers that comes from Sudan, Darfur, going down to the south of the country. It's, you cannot see it here, but it's on a cross route. So it's a very important area. In the wet season, they're completely isolated. You cannot get to them. So we decided to put a small airstrip in there. We negotiated with the village government to put a radio up there, a digital radio you can program so that they can only communicate from that point to our ops room and back. They cannot communicate, they're not part of the rest of the system. So every morning they would communicate with the ops room about the situation there, if there's anything warning us, or very important, if any of our rangers in the area misbehave or do anything they don't like, they talk to us about it, and we can sort out very early problems very quickly because we could fly to that point. We also, right in the beginning, schooling is a very big problem in Chad. Most of his villages has got no schooling facilities, so we put what we call a SECO school in place. It's just a very temporary thing. It's a wonderful thing they make there, these rolls of grass. It lasts one season. We put SECO schools up. We employed a teacher there under the government education system. And now in the villages, we had a teacher school that worked for us. We had a radio operator, an airstrip. We based some rangers here in the wet season, and we had a forward base where any information, if the school kids pick up there in the field something happening, they see camels with people on they don't know that's armed, bring it to the teacher, teacher take it to the radio operator, radio operator warns us. If 2 or 3 villages give the same sort of information, we know there's a problem. And in that way, we had buy-in from the communities as an early warning system, plus they got some benefit out of the park. We used horses extensively, very hardy horses that we bought up from, we bought these horses from the local nomads. They were very overloaded. You can see here one of the early patrols going out with this slide actually show a lot of things, hiding around guns, behind guns and rockets. That's how the Rangers went out. They were not very well trained at that time. They were not very well prepared to stand up against these Sudanese, and they would go out with in this case, a rocket launcher, belt-fed machine guns. Anyone that knows something about RPG said that's not the way you should use it. This ranger here was within this year killed up in the north. In the year this picture was taken, he was killed up in the north by Sudanese gangs that came in. So you can understand they had a reason why they acted like this. We had to get the horses up to shape. I'm not the biggest friend of a horse, because I've learned that if you buy him there, whereas with that nomad out there, this is one that is brought in that we can buy it, a very powerful horse there, is doing very well there. As soon as you pay for him and you put him in the park register, that horse just wants to die. And you have a constant fight to keep them alive. So I kept out of it, and Lorna, who knows horses, she took over that part of the operation. They got new saddles in that was better. If we go back, you see the local saddles was very hard on the horses. They got a better equipment. In the corner here is Mohammed, our veterinarian, a wonderful person who worked with Lorna. And here again, a bit of a lesson about common sense, about the language, because here everybody speaks French. Mohammed doesn't even speak French, he only speaks Arabic. Lorna speaks only English, and she speaks a very little bit of French. But you would find them we built a very smart stables. You would find the two of them in those stables talking for hours. I don't know what they were talking, but they would walk around the horse, discuss, look at medicine, push the horse. And it's just again a lesson. If two people have got common sense and got the same passion for something, you don't need a language. They just go on. Language was a very big problem there for us. As I said, it's French. We learned French. I was insulted once very badly because I gave one of our workshop guys clear instructions in French what to do, how to do. He answered me back. I answered him again. And then a French-speaking person, expatriate who was close by, asked me later, you know, what language did you speak to that guy in? I told him, you don't have to know. If we have common sense, it's French, but you obviously don't have common sense. That's why I didn't understand. Horses was a very big part of it, as I said, and the result of all of that was we had good, healthy horses that every year we improved on them, built up on them, and could do these patrols. In West Africa, and Chris, you would know there's many what we call paper parks, parks that lies out there that was created years ago and just went to nothing. They're still there. If you look on the Mitchell map, it will still be a green patch, but there's nothing in it. And I believe the big mistake, and that's where I think African parks did very well in their way of approaching this. You have to have manpower, of course, if you want to establish these parks. You have to have people. The second thing you do need is fuel or power. Get all the computers, internet, workshops going. You need that. You need vehicles, you need tractors, and you need to maintain them, and you need their spares. Then you can start to do anti-poaching. Then you can manage it. Then your HR teams can work. Then you can fly the planes out. You can go all around. The management of the planes was very important. The maintenance of it in the middle of nowhere. This was Chris. He came in once a year to get all the planes going. In the meantime, we had to do it. But that's how you take a paper park and you get it to something functioning. Of course, the thing that you do the last, and you you actually don't have to do it, is bring in the research. That's really not necessary in here. Even if they want to visit, Gus Mills visited us there. We only allowed him to come in year 6 and just for a very short time. It was the headquarters of Zakouma, a very interesting place with the parade outside. Slowly, with having all of that in place, the park came together and we have had a functioning operation. I want very quickly just to talk about the rest of Chad, because in that time there were many small populations all over Chad. We were very worried about that because that was targeted by the groups from Darfur. And we were worried that if they finish one, they would move on to Zakouma. So we decided to move all over Chad, put elephant collars on as many as we could. This is in Lake Chad, a very hot place. We took off there that day, 50 degrees. We're very interesting, very small population of elephants lived in the communities there. Now, this is a Boko Haram country. You've never seen a place with so many guns. Everybody carries a gun. But this small population lived within that community. Very interesting about this population, we found them in the middle of the day, that only 3 or 4 of them are standing. The rest are all sleeping, a siesta. I've never seen it with groups like this, that they all fast asleep all around. And you would find the locals on motorbikes passing within 20 meters from them, totally ignoring the elephants, and the elephants ignored them. It's a very interesting small population that's still surviving there. We couldn't know later on they wanted to go back and revisit, but they couldn't because of all the turmoil at that time. This is one of the bulls there that we call it. You can just see that bull is absolutely massive. Pete Morkel standing on the one side there, 2 meters high. We collared this bull and gave us very important or very interesting information of what is happening there. Those trips was not without all their problems. Here one night, Pete couldn't get out. We were above him for about 3 hours when he tried to get to a small herd in the middle of nowhere. We had to sleep there at night there unprepared. You can see here in the bottom corner a carpet. While staying there in the middle of nowhere, nomads appeared, said, no, we cannot sit here like this. They brought the carpet out, brought food, looked after us the whole night. The next day we took off and went home. A wonderful people, and really a privilege to have worked with them and mixed with them. This was the result. Many small populations all around Zakouma, and we kept track of where they are, and we try and keep track of what's happening to them. Bubangida soon after this had a very big massacre where most of the elephant there were actually wiped out. And the people who operate in Bubangida, intelligence showed they came here up from the Sudan, travel all through the Aouk, down past Gore, Mondu, into this area, shot the elephants, load them on camels, and went all the way back here again. So we were very aware. We intensified patrols and aerial patrols on that side during that time, very worried that they would also come into Zakouma. Just about an incident which had a very big impact on Zakouma. In the second year, we realized the elephants in the north settled around that area. Flying there, we saw the bones of previous massacre sites. So we knew there was shooting going on there. So we established a small patrol up at Heban. It is 6 rangers that on horseback stay there, and we change them every 10 days. We had 1 cook with them, but it's a very isolated place. In between Heban and Zakouma, as I said previously, that's what it looks like. You cannot get there. You can only get there by plane. The rangers heard shooting. We sent a plane up there. They did a long patrol, and a credit to the pilots at that time and the patrol who went out. They found the poachers camp in that area. We put more rangers up. They raided the camp. One person was in the camp, ran away, but in the camp, what we found in the camp, opened our eyes. It's horse medicine, a fully equipped camp. Horse medicine, solar panels, some ivory, not much because the raiders were out at that time. The horse, they were killed in the raid when they raided the camp. We found over 1,000 rounds of ammunition, spare parts for G3 rifles. That's what they used to shoot the elephants. We find satellite phones that they communicate to Sudan with. If they have enough ivory, they communicate back, give them coordinates. They come out with camels, they pick it all up. These satellite phones we sent away to Interpol. They screened them, and we found video clips on here that shows previous massacres that looked down in Bubangida. So we knew this is a gang that knows what to do. We carried on with the patrols. They were in the area, we didn't know. We captured one of them later on, the cook that was in the camp, so we got the information. The other 2 horses died as well. So they were stuck out here, 10 days horse ride from Darfur. What they did, they realized where our camp was. We changed the Royal Rangers every 2 weeks by aeroplane. And they worked out where this camp is on a morning when the rangers, all of the rangers are very devoted Muslims, go out very early to pray. They went out to pray, and all 6 were murdered by these guys who was waiting in the camp for them. Only the cook got away, ran away. For 2 days he swam, he was wounded, he was shot through the back. He swam through some of those marshes and he got to one village. It took him to headquarters, and that's where he got the news. It was devastating for us. Only a few days later, we were allowed to go out there. You can still see the graves in the background. By that time, the bodies were lying there for 7 days. We only dug graves right next to them and put them in the graves. A village nearby walked over 20 kilometers out to come and help us. And after it all, we all prayed at the site. And this was how they would have been in the position when these guys killed them. We realized it was a very big shock to us. The rangers there as 3 wives, the Pens, 2 or 3 wives, many children. Many of them was older rangers. They were game eco guards, what we call them. They looked and after the park, count elephants, count game, not infantrymen, not people that was up against this brutal action from the Sudanese. What I failed to say is in that camp, we found clear evidence. I didn't put it here, but clear evidence that the raiders who came in there was part of a military unit in Sudan. It was confirmed by the notes we found there, the uniform. So it was definitely a Sudanese military who came in. The evidence we gave to the embassies, and I know afterwards a lot of pressure was put on Sudan to prevent this from happening again. But we realized we will have to do something if we can go against that. We recruited young guys from all around the park, from communities around the park, and we gave them an intensive training. This was all done under African Parks, where we get donor money from the European Union. So we had to be very careful to train these rangers how to act in this situation. It's not a shoot to kill a situation we have. If we arrest a fisherman, you do it only by talking to him. If somebody point a gun at you or the person next to you and start to shoot you and threaten your life, then you can react. And it's only through long training that we brought that into the rangers. They cannot do what other military groups do around in Chad. They have to be different. And then that training was from the beginning very intensive. Also, we decided early on that we're not going to put our rapid response or these young teams on horseback. We've seen what happens if horses come near these elephant herds. They panic. It's absolutely madness. We wanted to keep it like that. If poachers on horseback come in, it should be like that. So we decided we're going to use vehicles and get vehicles to stay around the elephant herds, and the new rapid response teams will operate from vehicles. With vehicles, we found you can easily get into the elephant herds, and I accept that. To find the right vehicle was a problem in the middle of Chad. You only have Land Cruiser pickups. Anyone who knows a Land Cruiser in that situation knows it's designed to get stuck with the back spring leaf. So we had to look at something else. Luckily, there was no Land Rovers in Chad, so we didn't have to look at that. But what we did do is the late Roland Maraf from Chinko, from Central African Republic, operated there for many years, had very, very good experience of what you do there. And he invited me to go with him to United Arab Emirates to look at vehicles there. Now, this was early days when you can do what you wanted to do, basically. You cannot do it nowadays. It will never happen again. But I put $80,000 of cash in my pocket, and I got an Ethiopian Air flight, flew to N'Djamena, and I met Roland in Dubai. Roland knew Dubai very well. We went around all these markets. We found all these are all yappy cars that was from Japan. They was never used in the bush. You buy them for $5,000. It's a station wagon. And we bought everything else you need. The tires, the paint, we bought oil for the aircraft. We bought everything you needed, put it in 2 big containers. It's wonderful working there. People are absolutely honest. You work with Pakistanis, with Indians, with people from Afghanistan that all have their different trades in Dubai. They're absolutely honest and an absolute eye-opener for me how to do. All of these equipments on the containers around the coast, Douala in Cameroon, in about 2 weeks on, I don't know, trucks and trains, because Chad is very isolated, a landlocked country. And when it arrived in Zakouma after about 4 months, we cut them up. Roland showed us how to cut them up, and we made these vehicles for early response, rapid response vehicles. The big thing of these vehicles is we can start to operate them 6 weeks earlier when the rain season stops, when the nomads come down, the critical times around the elephants. Because 6 weeks earlier, we had our rapid response teams in the field following the elephant herds. They didn't get stuck. They were easy to maintain. They were very lightweight. So just for me, a very good lesson of what we could do there. If you have a flexible budget, you cannot do it nowadays anymore. The finance controllers has blocked all those loopholes. There's now so many SOPs, so many rules. But at that time, and this is now quite a few years ago, you could do it. We also started to operate the motorbike teams outside that supported the nomads. They went, because cattle rustling is a very big thing here. So these motorbike teams worked with the nomads outside. At the same time, they gathered good information for us, and we had a presence in the communities. I do the wrong button all the time. We invested heavily in education. This is what we call an elephant school in the village. This is in Goscharat. We built it very quickly. We had a machine flown in to do this eco-friendly blocks. And we built schools as fast as we could and started an education process, because all the communities were very, very far behind with all schooling. It worked very well. We trained the teachers. Here's in Goscharat, often elephants in this village meeting, totally accepted by the community. These are the old bulls that is around in Zakouma. And it's wonderful to see the integration and the acceptance of these people. Of course, if the numbers go up, crop raiding, it will be another story. We invested heavily in the tourism, Tinga camp, a local camp, and then I've heard quite a few people there who has been out to Camp Nomad. Camp Nomad in the beginning was an absolute, it didn't look like this, I can assure you. It was just the mosquito net on the plains. But people had such wonderful experiences that we knew we should develop it further. It's a very simple, very small little camp that grew from nothing, now very popular, and it was really fun to set the whole thing up. It's very simple. Imogen Potgieter, the wife of Darren Potgieter, the pilot at that time, had a lot to do with the style, setting up, went through a lot of hard times getting everything in place. Operating a camp in those temperatures in the beginning was a real challenge, but they did very well. Today it is now with the virus, of course, a problem, but fully booked for many years. Game viewing very well from there. This again, a vehicle that was given to us by the president, the ex-rebel vehicle. If you look down there, you can still see where the machine guns was mounting on it, converted into a game viewer, and a very good experience. The right time, short time, 6 months, but people know, who has been there will know. We also built a local camp for the Chadians. They love Zakouma. They want to come there all the time. So we built these local huts. We use the competition with local women groups that will come in. They built these huts very quickly. And the locals would come in and just stay there for a night or two, sometimes 30, 40 people on a small pickup. Just love to come in, sleep on the river there, see the elephants. We organized 2 vehicles constantly that did game drives for them. They took ownership, and it was a very important part, together with the villages around that now relied on Zakouma for security. Almost every year before the wet season, there was an argument of where we should base our rangers. They wanted their rangers with them because it brought stability, and they knew they had the radio communication with us to, if everything goes wrong, to talk to us. Zakouma, of course, is a very important last resort. The Central African lion, a very good population, threatened in that area. They're doing very well in Zakouma. We have the pale fox there. If you're lucky to see it at night, night drives is a very big thing there. There's so many birds, there's so many cats, that night drives is wonderful. We have probably the most important population of Kordofan giraffe that's increasing. Giraffe was in the early days heavily hunted by the nomads. They used the tail. If you get married, the tail is a present to the new bride. So it was hunted heavily. And in the first 6 years there, basically the hunting of giraffe completely stopped. So they're increasing even outside the park now. So a very important population of Kordofan giraffe. Buffalo, you have a mix of the forest buffalo and the Cape buffalo, basically. It's a very beautiful, colorful red buffalo, smaller horns and so on, but very healthy herds, of course, also supporting the lion population there, and a very colorful herds. This is a very interesting slide, the 2 slides. This was the first 18 months, the movement of elephants in Zakouma, and then the last 18 months of our first 6 years there. There was almost no movement out of Zakouma. All the elephants stayed in Zakouma. As I said, the first few years, there were no calves. After 2 years, we started to spot the first calves. I think in the 3rd year, we counted 16, and it was a very big highlight. Now, of course, the whole structure of the elephant populations is again small calves, bigger calves, and it's starting to become normal, and numbers are on the increase. Also, the tusked elephants came to our house very often. They were completely relaxed. It was a wonderful experience also for all the school children. It was one of the places they visit. In the summer, they would come to the house, drink out of the hose pipe. In the whole wet season, for 8, 9 months, they would disappear. You never see them again. And then one day, you know, the water is not so sweet or so clean anymore. They arrived at the house and calmly stand on the veranda and beg for some clean water. It's about 7, 8 of these bulls that did it, and it became a huge attraction for all of the school groups, all the locals that we brought in. And it really helped to change the attitude towards elephants. It went all over. Videos from there where I know a couple of times taken right to the president, to ministers, and it played a very big role in the conservation of Zakouma. As I said, small calves appeared again. It was a very big thing for us when that started to happen. But not without pain. At the back there, the pictures of the rangers at that time that was murdered up at Hebron. The youngsters in the front here, 3 of them were related to those ones that were killed. Isai here in the front, after his father was killed, a wonderful person, 50 years old when he was killed at Hebron. He had a reputation of planting trees. There's many trees in Zakouma, fruit trees, wild trees that he planted. He was killed up there. And Issa, his son, stepped forward. That is the culture there. That is the way. Stepped forward and said he wanted to become a ranger. At the time, he was too young. We put him in a workshop. We trained him as a driver. We trained him as a mechanic until he was at the right age. And then he joined the rapid response team and became a very valuable member. 2 of the other groups here, 2 of the other people in this team as well, had brothers and fathers killed at that incident, and they didn't hesitate to step forward and take up those positions. And it's wonderful to work with rangers and with staff that has got that dedication, fearless, knowing that they could be killed, but who step forward and take up those positions. Again, coming back to that first elephant collaring, this was about 4 years later when we got a message from the nomads that we should please visit them. And the same people that was with us at that time here donates, and it's a very valuable thing, a big healthy horse. And here they donated a horse to the anti-poaching team. We had a ceremony there. You can see Muhammad, the veterinarian, who came to accept this horse here on the left, and a big occasion, and just a show or a show of gratitude and a show of a partnership of ownership. It was for us, it happened a couple of times, and it was for us a very big occasion, because to be given a horse is a very big thing in Chad. We also had the function there with the president who supported this project incredibly. The whole Chadian government supported it. It wouldn't have be a success if it wasn't for that support and for the support of the European Union, who also often visited this project. But throughout, people wanted to stop it. We had some opposition from certain parts, but the government has always been a very big support of the project. Here, the president is burning every bit of ivory we could find in Chad, put on one heap, and we burnt it down. Very special picture for me is the village Giraffe. You see these children playing around the elephants who will stand in that village for 2-3 days, very happily, villagers accepting them, very calm. And in the middle there you see the pile of where that ivory were burnt, what was available in the country that time. And it's to me always how I wanted to leave Zakouma, is in a condition like that. The whole Zakouma story is going on. I'm sure you're going to get the current park warden there, Rian Labuschagne, because remember, this was the first 6 years. Since then, another 4 years. We get all the Zakouma monthly reports. We know it's going forward and going well there. Also, people can confess to that. That's tonight here on this group who's visited recently. But I hope for us as well that Rian will have a chance to tell us what is happening in Zakouma now and in the last 4 or so years. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we give Rian round of applause. I met Rian for the first time, I think in 1987, Rian, 88. And I don't know if you can remember this little box. Here's a box here, and here's a knife. And Rian made this knife called Ubijan, which is the Zulu and Shangaan word for a rhino. And this knife was made with the best steel, the best wood, iron wood, the best knife you can get. This knife is symbolic for me, which I will always keep, Rian, of a person of absolute dedication, person who does everything, he tries to do exceptionally well, out of the ordinary. So Rian, I got to know you as the son of a missionary. I think you grew up in Malawi, and your love for people and communities already started in your childhood years. Rian is an extremely humble person, together with his wife, Lorna. And Rian has received the Prince William Award for Conservation, a Lifetime Achievement Award, for outstanding dedication and exceptional contribution to conservation. So Rian, tonight I want to give 5 stars to your presentation, but your presentation also represents a lifetime. And the first star goes for common sense, because that is what Rian always had, is just common sense, how to do and what to do. Secondly, I also want to applaud Africa Parks for the work they have done there to bring the order and to make things happen. Thirdly, I would also like to bring a star to the unknown rangers to us who have given their lives for what they are doing. And then fourthly, I want to give a star to Lorna, your wife, and your kids who have lived in Africa all over with you doing the job. And then the 5th star goes to Rian Labuschagne, a tough, high quality, well-rounded, humble, extremely dedicated, and extremely practical guy with common sense.
Yeah, I wanted to know if there was an update. I know they reintroduced black rhinoceros to Zakouma, and they had, an issue. I wondered if they ever. I don't think I ever read if they know exactly what happened, and if I do think they've solved the issue, and were there plans to reintroduce more rhino to Zakouma?
Yeah, if I can quickly answer that, happened just after our time there. We were involved in the planning of it, but it happened. It was successful. However, there was some complications. I know they're working on it. I know it will continue, I think, with more introductions. But I think we leave that to somebody like Leon, the current park manager there. I really encourage, I know Chris was trying to get him to give a talk about the current situation in Zakouma, and he can fill in much better on what is the situation there.
Okay.
Thank you. There was a question, there's a hand raised, help me. One of our young honorary rangers had his hand up. Rod, quickly have a look for me, Maret.
Little Bradell.
If you can unmute, I can't
Luke Bradell.
Bridle.
Bridle.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, no, because Chris said Bradell. It's not my fault.
That's fine. I just want to know, do you allow new members into your force in Zakouma?
Do you mean new local members into the anti-poaching force?
Yeah, like new people that are able to, like let's say I wanted to go to Zakouma and I wanted to work in your poaching. How do you get there?
It's very difficult. It's such a volatile situation. The responsibility. the whole issue of culture and language, it's very difficult to bring anybody from outside. The only outsiders we bring in is for training, because the training is so important there to get the right attitude, the right level of skills. But it is very difficult for you to, in a place like Zakouma, maybe some of the other African parks projects, which is easier, but not easily in Zakouma. We would never allow an outsider to go on an active patrol there, or unless it's training.
So your steady flow is in all the locals of, like you said, the brothers and the sons. So your steady flow is there. Okay.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process. Every year, I know in the last year again, they do a recruitment. They bring new rangers.
He's muted.
Rian, 1 second. You got yourself muted there. Just unmute yourself. Accept it there.
Yeah, is that back on again?
Yeah, you're back on.
Now, if they didn't follow, all the rangers we use there is recruited from local Chadians. Or if I say we at that time, wouldn't easily allow an outsider to go on patrol. But in the training, yes, we would bring people from outside to help with the training in various things, first aid, radio communication, all of that. But actual on duty, it's not very easily, and we'll never really do that.
Thank you. Rian, I think there's Matti Jasper Maret. Do you have her or him?
It's a he.
I can't see, so...
It's Marty Jasper. Thanks very much, Rian. A very interesting talk, inspiring, and it makes us all want to get involved in some way. Besides the poaching with the Sudanese rebels that you described, there didn't seem to be the normal human-animal-wildlife conflict that you tend to find in many other African countries. I mean, you did say that if the population numbers increased, there could be crop raiding, and then it would become a problem. But at the moment, is that not really a problem in the park at all?
No, at the moment, there's a new chapter where a new area to the south has been included in Zakouma, Sianaka, with a corridor in between. And that is specifically to allow for more, it's almost double the Zakouma area. It allows for space to move. Of course, there is a human-animal conflict. You must remember all those nomads is camping around Zakouma with big herds of sheep and that. So lions, hyenas is always a problem. And you have to watch it. There's been cases of poisoning and that. And we have to work very close with the communities to solve that. Buffalo every now and then go out. And what I didn't say there, Zakouma it's an amazing place in as far as animals and humans. There's a river there, the Baasalamat. I've never seen so many crocodiles in my life, and big ones. And the locals and everybody walks through that river in and out. I've never seen an animal taken by a crocodile. They convinced me even. I had my Leatherman in my one hand, and I walked through that river with very big crocodiles all around me. And for some reason, they only go for fish. They do not go for people. People there will sleep out every night almost, just outside with many hyenas around. Never heard of an hyena attack. People that comes from Kruger knows you will never sleep outside. But that's, and the elephants, the same thing. Once you get into this elephant herd, you could walk. I've taken many people into that herd. In the beginning, you could walk with elephants. So it's a different behavior of many of the animals there. And not that that's going to help the human animal conflict. Still, if they raid a crop, they kill a cow, they kill a cow. But it was a problem that we could manage.
Thank you. Sorry.
The second part of the question, and at that point when I'd asked, you hadn't got onto the lions yet, so it was just about what other wildlife there is. So you did show us lions, you've mentioned hyenas and the giraffe and whatever. Are there other specials? I mean, that fox was something quite special, I suppose. Are there wild dogs there? Someone mentioned reintroduction of rhinos. What other kind of special wildlife is there, and are they safe from other poaching?
Yeah, there's wild dogs. Wild dogs is more outside the park, but occasionally they come in. We've seen them. There's cheetah again. And cheetah is on the outside. I suspect, you know, more around the livestock units. It's a problem for them. They will kill a cheetah if they find one. But they are in the park, and they became more and more resident in the park. Leopards is a healthy population of leopards. I think one of the most spectacular thing there is to go out at night, because there's so many birds. I cannot describe you the bird life there. Every little bush is full of some sort of bird. Because of that, the small cats, you know, serval, the African wildcat, a caracal is abundant. You know, you in a dry season outside the house, we would put the torch on, and there will be 6 or 7 cats around the water there of all different species. So small cats is really something in the dry season on a night drive an experience.
Thanks very much.
And then the rhinos, yeah, the rhinos has been introduced. We have photographs of black rhino there. Of course, it was Longaipes, a different subspecies, which is now extinct. But photographs of rhino in Zakouma, in the Bar Salamat, we released, or they released, this was after we left African Parks, and Leon Lamprecht and them released the introduced rhinos in a place that all the locals still say the last remaining ones survived. Sianaka Game Reserve just south, which is now part of Zakouma, was specifically proclaimed to protect black rhino. So we know they did well there. There was some hiccups with that introduction, but you know, all these things doesn't happen very easily. It's always a very big risk, but I know they're going to go on, and I'm sure it will be successful in the future.
Thank you, Marty. I'm muting you. The next question will come from, there's Justine and then Kolia. If you can please unmute Justine. Maret.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for an incredible talk. It's been fascinating. I'm a South African in New York, so we're deprived of lectures at the moment about conservation, so it's great. The question I have for you is the kinds of poachers that you're coming across, because it seems to be, from what you've said, that it's mostly Sudanese and not locals that are doing the bulk of the poaching. And I wanted to find out if that is the case still, and to what extent is the Sudanese government helping, and or the Chad government stepping in to try and stop that?
No, it's not only Sudanese. There's been some of the local nomads that have been involved in poaching as well. But the bulk of the poaching, the big massacres that part of the Africa is so well known for, where 80, 90 animals is killed at one, is usually done by the horse gangs coming from Sudan. After that first incident, you know that sorry, I just got off.
Okay, done. Thank you. Carry on, Rian.
You're muted, Rian. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know up to where did it go to, but no, it's not only the Sudanese, it is locals also, but the big massacres is usually done by the gangs that comes in from Sudan. After that incident, it was very well documented and was in the news, New York Times, CNN. A lot of pressure was put on the Sudanese government to do something about it. And the border guards were upgraded. So we never had a big raid like that again in Zakouma. But smaller poaching and smaller killing of elephants do happen by locals, and the killing of roan or killing of other buffalo and so on occasionally happen, but it's never seen a snare there, and bushmeat is not a problem in that part of the world.
That's great, thank you.
Kolia Becker, then Lance, then Janssen. Thank you, Kolia Becker. Kolia, let me just see if you are unmuted. I'm going to unmute you. There we go. Thank you, Kolia. You're unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you. This is so amazing. I would like to ask, what's like the aim with the coloring? Did you tag do you track the elephants, or do you just color them to identify them? What's the use behind the coloring?
The collaring was purely for security. It's a satellite collar, so we can read that position in our ops room, know exactly where that elephant is at the time. As I said there, we had to find out what's the movement of the elephants in the wet season, where they go. So the collaring was just an action to know what happens to the elephants, and then plan our anti-poaching to be as close as possible throughout the seasons, wet season, dry season, as close as possible to those elephant herds. But it also gave us a lot of other information, which people who could analyze, tell about what's happening with the groups. And it also showed us, as I showed in this last picture, how at that time, you must remember, I'm now talking 3 years ago, it's not in the now, but how at that time the behavior changed of that herd, the whole herd of, and often the whole herd is in one herd of 500 elephants, how it changed that they only stayed in the park, they didn't go out anymore. And we could do that only by every year upgrading the satellite collars on this elephant.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Were they solar panel charged? How do they?
Now these collars, it's satellite collars. They have a heavy weight underneath, and keeping the satellite part on the top. So they had batteries in. They last about 2 years, 3 years. And then usually the collar breaks and it goes off. But we got about 2 to 3 years of good information of wherever that elephant goes. And also to ID the different animals that we were doing out.
Wow.
Thank you, Kolia. Thanks, Rian. Over to Lance Steenkamp. Then Rian, I'm unmuting you, Lance. Just give a second. I think there was a question in the chat. If it's answered, it's fine. You just have to accept unmute, Lance. And Rian, I just want to ask if Lorna is around, and Zahn and any other of your family. I would like them to just sit around you so we can just say hi to them too. Lance, not accepting. Okay, Lance Steenkamp, you just have to accept unmute on your side. No, he's not coming in. Janssen Davies, here you are. I'm unmuting you, Janssen. You can go. Accept it. Thanks, Janssen.
Thank you, Chris. Rian, great talk. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And good work, you and African Parks there. Fantastic. Just a question. How many in total elephants were there in the park? And with them no longer dispersing like that during the seasons, was there any evidence of habitat destruction? Thank you.
No, when we go back in 2000, when there was 4,000 elephants, and this was an influx from outside because they were so chased and poached outside Zakouma. That's what we think, and that's what we try and work out then. It's so many poaching happen outside that the elephants moved into Zakouma. In the publications at that time, there was evidence that there was habitat destruction in certain parts of the park. But then with the decline from 4,000 to 400 and that dispersal and the time we were there, for those 6 years, the population just went over 500. It went down to about 400 and then just close to 500. We didn't see, even from flying, we didn't see any huge impact on the area. But I'm sure, if it comes back again to hopefully 1,000 there, you're going to start to see impact.
Thank you.
Thanks. There was Rian, is Lorna there?
Yeah, she's here.
Yeah, come, Mega, sit next to you. Hello, Lorna. Hello, Zon. this is the most resilient, toughest family you can get, but they all have the same eyes, soft, beautiful, gentle eyes. I think this family deserves another round of applause. To all of you, what you're doing. Lorna.
John and Rian. Lorna, how are you doing?
Just unmuting you. Rian, accept unmute. I'm putting people back on mute. Kate Pfeiffer, you're driving in Spain in your car. Thanks, Rian.
Lorna, it's good to see you. I've seen Zon and Rian today, but I haven't seen you.
Wow. Okay, so to the youngsters, this is what those who aspire to become rangers, you must aspire to become as old as Uncle Rian, 50 years old, and his young wife and his daughter, and live a long life where you dedicate your life to what you are doing. Wonderful. I am really touched over the years in the way that you did things as a family.